Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I'm so excited today because I get to nerd out about city planning. That is one of my favorite things to do. I love thinking about and talking about ad nauseum about what makes cities tick, what is the future all about, and basically what should we be thinking about on a daily basis when we're going about our lives and enjoying whatever beautiful city that we live in. And I am joined by an expert. I am joined by Megan Gude, pronounced like dude. I was informed recently. She's a community builder, blending experience in urban planning, facilitation, advocacy, and engagement to strengthen the places and connections that unite us. That is a wonderful sounding intro. But more importantly, she's the vice president of South End with Center City Partners of Charlotte Center City Partners, which if you don't know what Center City Partners does and you live in the urban core of Charlotte, then you haven't been paying attention. These guys have been around for a while now. I'm going to let Megan explain kind of who they are, what they do, and why you should care about them if you live in the urban core of Charlotte, North Carolina. But they have been a force. I mean, they are a behind the scenes force. I use their reporting, their data collection, their analysis almost weekly. As a matter of fact, I just sent their report out to a group that is looking to move in here from Texas because they have excellent analytics. But enough of that. Megan, do me a favor real quick. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, why they should care about what you have to say, and just introduce yourself.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. And thanks for the invitation to be here with you today. So I work for Charlotte Center City Partners, which is essentially a business improvement district or a municipal services district for Charlotte's urban core. In North Carolina, business improvement districts across the country are organized in all kinds of different ways, but in North Carolina, they're called municipal services districts. So a lot of the funding comes from a special tax, a very small addition on the property tax in certain districts.
Teeny
So
tiny
we
little tax. Teeny little
Right,
tax.
small. So we contract with the city to kind of administer putting those funds to use on growing, planning, marketing, and developing the downtown core for our city. Charlotte has 5 municipal services districts, and Center City Partners manages 4 of those. 3 are in Uptown within the Loop, and then 1 is South End, which is an additional district that was formed in the late 90s. So my role is managing programs specifically for South End, which is pretty fun because that area has just gone through a lot of change, and it's created a lot of opportunity to really tell the stories about where our city has been and where it's going. South End has been a place where Charlotte is in a lot of ways at its most welcoming, bringing in new businesses, new investors. A lot of new people who move to the city end up in South End because there's a lot of rental housing, multifamily, new residential that's available there. So it's kind of this cool urban laboratory of like what a really urban district in a southern city can look like. And that's pretty fun.
So I want to talk about South End. I want to spend a lot of time there. But do me a favor, would you mind going back a little bit farther? I'm gonna hate that if I mess that up. Go back and tell me the why behind Center City Partners, because now it's just a thing, right? Now it just exists and it runs and it has tremendous amounts of support, both public and private. But walk me through why it was a good idea to start Center City Partners and the people behind it and why they thought it was so important.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll preface this with Center City Partners was originally started as I think the Uptown Development Corporation in the 80s.
Mhm.
And I was a very small person at that point and did not live in Charlotte. So I haven't lived a lot of this, but I think the basic tenet of what Center City Partners does and can do is all about connections and what we can do together to develop our city. And it started out really with a group of leaders saying, we could do more and we could do more together. How do we do that? And over the decades, that has evolved into a really robust program of work where you have a whole group of people with expertise in urban planning and marketing and events and economic development and research and community engagement, all focused on what is it that we want for our city, really for our region? What does it mean to have a really strong downtown where we can all come together, where it's easy for businesses to come in and see the potential of this place and this region. And Center City has this sort of portfolio of programs to help do that. Some of it is the data and analytics, like you mentioned. Some of it is activation, everything from putting pianos out on the street to big special festivals to a parade to this week we have our I Heart Rail Trail lights out on the rail trail. It's a 3-week, we're calling it a festival sort of. It's really 3 weeks of art installations that are out on this public rail trail next to the light rail line in the heart of South End that all light up at night, all designed by local artists. And that's the kind of thing that like adds so much to a place to have those kinds of things happen, but there's a ton of work behind the scenes that goes into actually making those possible. And that's our sweet spot, kind of in that space between public space and public funding, private partners, and people who just want to come together and do something neat for the city.
The lights on the rail trail is like an Instagram buffet. I mean, people are going crazy for that right now, and it's really fun to see. So walk me through. There's a joke that I use when commercial real estate guy. I'm dealing with people moving in from out of town all the time, business wise. There's a joke that I tell, and it is, when someone is, call it 28 to 33 years old, good job, making decent money. They don't talk about like what part of Charlotte they're going to move to. They talk about what part of South End they're going to move to. How has South End become, the brightest, shiniest star of Charlotte? When coming from a Charlottean that was born in 1980. Don't do the math on how old I am, please. That South End was not that. I grew up. And I've told the story before. My mom put me through, wonderful private schools, working her tail off as a florist on Winifred, in the middle of South End, and I assure you, it was not the South End that we know it to be today. So walk me through how that's become so dynamic in such a short period of time, in your words.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Adam, and it's something that people ask a lot, and I think it's really fascinating to look at the cycles that have happened in South End and see how they're going to play out across the rest of our city and other cities at the same time. There's a couple of things that have come together, sort of magic ingredients, all in one place that have I think driven South End where it is now. But there's this broader pattern I see of, community vision followed by public investment in that vision, followed by private investment to build out that capacity. And you can see that pattern in South End in a bunch of different ways. The first one is really like the light rail line, right? Like that started with community vision, literally like a bunch of train advocates taking a really old streetcar and running it with a really long electrical cord on a 100-yard stretch of abandoned railroad track. And that was the community vision. I mean, there were also sort of planning conversations happening, but there was this real desire from the community of like, we want, commuter local train service in our city, and we're going to show you what that looks like. And then that was followed by vast public investment in planning that out and building it. And then with that, this incredible promise that private investors came in and said, like, we see the future of this. In the past 10 years, we've seen so much investment right around the transit stations on the Blue Line, which is really pretty funny because before the second half of the Blue Line opened, you didn't have that many people who lived on the Blue Line actually taking the train to work. Like Charlotte's transit network and just honestly traffic congestion hadn't gotten to the point yet where people had to do that. And so not everyone did, but people still, individuals and kind of investors see the promise of what that can do for our city and what that kind of density can bring in terms of community life and ability to walk to things. And so people would choose to live in a place that's right on a transit station, even if they didn't necessarily plan on taking the train every day, like you would in a mega city somewhere, further up the East Coast, something like that. And then we've seen that pattern in a couple of other ways as well. Like the rail trail alongside the light rail line was originally planned to be an emergency access path. So you could get fire trucks.
Now it's an emergency access path for like Lululemon wearing joggers.
Well, that's why it was there.
Scooters.
The planners were saying, like, what if we need to get a fire engine back here? And so this path was put together, and then the community came together and said, like, hey, we think this could be something way different and even more. And now each individual property owner is taking a look at their section of the trail and saying, hey, I think we could actually use this really differently. It's no longer our back door, it's actually the front door. It's how people are finding us, and it's really important to what we want to do.
Well, and Charlotte has historically, like most cities, it's just such a car dominated culture and car dominated city. And South End, currently is the only real walkable, live, work, play, cohesive neighborhood. And some people bemoan, kind of the nouveau South End, but it's truly the only neighborhood like it in between Atlanta and DC. So obviously it has a tremendous amount going for it, and a tremendous amount of growth ahead of it. What scares you about South End as it sits now and the direction? Because the trajectory is truly unbelievable. What scares you?
Good question. I think there's sort of two things that we all need to take note of. And one is that South End is really like, it's Charlotte's first transit-oriented neighborhood, really. So it's the first place that we've seen, like, hey, this is what urban density in Charlotte, in a southern city, could look like. And it's shown us in a lot of ways, and this has been a big topic of conversation across the city and in planning circles, like shown us what works and what doesn't work from the zoning code as it was then. And that was a
I
big
thought we were supposed to look at Atlanta for all the stuff that doesn't work. Now we got to look at ourselves. Jeez.
You just can't go through this without taking a shot at Atlanta, can you?
It's impossible.
So there are things that we've seen that hasn't worked. We had South End this is another one of the magic ingredients, sort of all these big industrial parcels. And when in the late 90s, the state started allowing developers to enter in brownfields agreements, all of a sudden those parcels became available for redevelopment in a new way. But then it all happened really quickly. And I think that pace of change creates some opportunities, but it also creates some concerns because it happens so fast you can't necessarily adjust. And I think that the city has seen that, and that's one of the reasons that the city adopted a new zoning code for transit-oriented development first before redoing the rest of the code, is because as a city and as a community, we saw what was happening there and we thought, well, some of this is really great. We have all these people living in this one area now. They really love the rail trail, the walkability, the proximity to transit.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have enough ground floor retail in a lot of those buildings. And that starts to kill the energy and the life. And, we may get to this later, but like, you don't have as many of the spaces, the small affordable spaces for retail. So that's one of the lessons I think, like as a city and as a community, we need to look at is how do we make sure that in the face of change, we can still keep the people and the businesses that
Mm-hmm.
like are part of us and
Mm-hmm.
make this place special.
So that's a good segue. I mean, this for the next 30 minutes, this is your show. And I'd love to kind of unpack what you said, because it leads to a couple things I wanted to talk about. So I want to talk about micro retail because I'm a retail geek and this is a retail show. So I want to get to that. But I mean, one thing that scares me is what made South End cool above and beyond the light rail and the density and the walkability, because those are impossible to quantify how important those things are. But another thing that made it cool, and I'm going to give some love to Asana right now because they were certainly one of the late comers to South End, but most important, them and Eden's from a retail perspective were impossible to overstate how important they were to take South End to kind of that next level. But right now, South End, if you look at the trajectory, is becoming much more Midtown Atlanta than hip, cool brick and beam, warehousey, low slung single story buildings. And it's obviously purely a function of how much the dirt is worth, right? Like if you're going to pay 20 million bucks for a parcel, you're never going to make your money back unless you go vertical. So how do you keep kind of the essence of what made South End so hip and cool, that kind of kicked this thing off, and still like let it grow? Like it seems to me that those two things are kind of heading in different directions.
There's something you said I have to push back on a little bit, which is that
Good.
Asana
That's
made
the
it
point.
cool.
What's that?
Which is that, Asana made South End cool.
I mean, cool, I guess, is extremely subjective, right? They're extremely subjective. How about instead of cool, relevant to retailers on a national level?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the story that is helpful for us in understanding retail across Charlotte is that like there was magic happening by people in the community with vision and a willingness to try things. And I think what has really made South End a standout part of our city, to my eyes, is that people are willing to try things there. And when we had all these old industrial warehouse buildings, you had a whole bunch of really visionary art galleries and creatives who were willing to move in and take them and try some cool new things. And retail that would totally succeed in Charlotte right now, but was 10 or 15 years too early. And so
Right,
it didn't really
right.
take off yet. And then, of course, the first breweries, but even before that, it was a place where people were just willing to try things. You had some really visionary developers and business owners who invested in the old mills, in the Nebel's knitting mill that became the design center, well before what we know it as now, and even before that in the old Atherton mill and Parks Kramer building. So there were a lot of different generations of visionaries who saw that like these buildings that are part of our history can be part of our future too. It's just going to take some rethinking of them and trying some things. And then Asana and Eden's and the other institutional investors who've come in and really fallen in love with this place and some of these buildings, they have portfolios all over the country. But we call to talk. I talked to Sam about the design center yesterday, and that you can just tell that they feel differently about these places because they're really close to home, where they're here all the time, and they're really special. And they have elevated, I think, the interest from a national retail perspective in investing in this market. And then some of the early retailers who did come in, especially at Atherton, had such success. I think Anthropology did so well at Atherton that then that group said, well, actually, we're going to put a free people here too, because this is really working. And Charlotte wasn't on their radar before, but it's really kind of showing the strength of this market and the growth here in a different way.
So I would go a step further or farther. I'm gonna look this up when I get off, or somebody's gonna write me in comments, tell me what a moron I am. I would say that South End has put Charlotte on the radar for I mean, I do this for a living. Like, I will go ahead and say it and put a period behind it. South End has put Charlotte on the radar for a massive percentage of national retailers that only knew Charlotte as South Park Mall. That's it. Now, I'm not advocating that we make South End South Park Mall for millennials or whatever. I'm not advocating that, but I will say that, I mean, the difference South End has made in the national conversation for retailers in Charlotte has been unbelievable.
Let me ask you a question, Adam. When you're,
Hit me.
you're in this space, when you are bringing somebody to Charlotte, back when we could travel, remember that travel, and
Hey, don't tell anybody, but people are still coming to Charlotte to look around, and they're blown away if they're, because a lot of them from the Northeast. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys are like living. You're like out walking around, getting a cup of coffee." They can't quite grasp it.
I'm glad to hear it. As long as they wear their mask, they're welcome here.
Masked
Um,
up.
where do you take people? Like, what do you want people to see if you're going to walk somebody down the street? Where are those spots where people can see it and just get it?
Charlotte in general or South End specifically?
Either one.
So right now, unfortunately, there is a massive disclaimer when we go uptown. So you're not going to, outside of your office, you're not going to meet a bigger uptown homer than me, right? Like, I'm a massive. I work uptown. My whole life is around uptown Charlotte. So we're not doing a lot of uptown tours right now because it's not a fair representation of what uptown historically has been or will be, 6 months from today, right? So unfortunately, we're not doing a lot of uptown. Center ice, center field, whatever you want to call like the epicenter of South End is kind of a hard question right now because it I feel like it bounces around almost monthly, right? I would have told you 6 months ago that Main and Main was the corner of Tremont and Camden, right? Like right in front of, you can see Edens, you can see Asana. There's just, you can see the rail trail. You have, concrete and steel multifamily right there. You see cranes, you just spin around and see cranes. So I would have said that. Now it's a little harder to say between what Beacon has done with the rail yard project, what Cousins is planning to do across the street, what Invesco and Spectrum are doing at Vantage. You could certainly make the argument that they're pulling Main and Main closer to Uptown and further blurring the lines between Uptown and South End, right? Like that's where I keep going back to this kind of Midtown idea. I'm not advocating we change the name from South End to Midtown Charlotte, but that's what it's becoming. You can't put 500,000 square feet on a block half a dozen times without kind of changing the DNA of a neighborhood. So I love Camden because it just has so much freaking energy, man. I always tell people that the light rail is the spine, right? And then you have the pedestrian Main Street and the vehicular Main Street, right? You've got Camden and you have South Boulevard. So I typically will try to give people a taste of all of that. And another massive piece of the secret sauce that South End has is, oh, by the way, you can practically hit a golf ball to Dilworth, which is one of the coolest freaking neighborhoods in the city, bar none. Like Dilworth is incredible. The bungalow, like those are people that could afford to live anywhere in Charlotte. They could certainly afford a McMansion on the outskirts of Charlotte, but they choose to live in a hip little urban bungalow because they want to be a part of the fabric of the city and they want to be able to walk to cool places. So really long-winded way of saying I kind of give them a taste of everything.
Cool. You touch on something really interesting, thinking about like, where is Main and Main? Where's the kind of the heart of South End now? And I see us going towards something that kind of not to love on planners, because, I was one, but that the planners foresaw in some of our city planning.
Just us city planners doing our thing.
I know, we love them. Called for a city of neighborhood centers where you don't have just one epicenter, but you have all these different places that each have kind of a different vibe and different energy. And I think we're getting there in Charlotte in a lot of different ways across the whole city, with different epicenters, on Davidson and at Camp North End and on the West Side, and like
Plaza Midwood, Fremore West. I mean, it's unbelievable.
But even in a micro way in South End, you have, energy in a couple spots on a couple ends of Camden, certainly between Atherton and the Design Center and what's happening down Tremont. There's great energy. There's great energy starting to happen around the center and northern part of Camden. What is happening at the rail yard with the micro retail on Winifred and the great public space on the front end. Like, I think we're going to end up with a bunch of different nodes that are all easy to walk between, which is great for livability, for office workers, for anybody visiting. There's kind of a lot of things to do.
So we keep dancing around micro retail. This is a retail show after all. Why don't we talk about micro retail in your words, or in your mind? Why are we even talking about it? Why is it important?
I'm really interested in it because it helps us in a bunch of ways. As you mentioned earlier, how do we keep the district and the city that we want as more money comes in and things get more and more expensive, and more diversity in the kinds of spaces that we have available for people to use, whatever that means, public spaces, retail spaces, residential spaces. The more variation we have, then the more opportunity there is for different people to come in and occupy part of our city and do something neat there. And I think that's especially true for retail. And Charlotte, banking city that we've been, we've especially uptown have had historically a lot of really big spaces with either empty bank lobbies or, pre-pandemic, those were all pivoting to big restaurant spaces, 20,000 square feet, expensive. And
I love those deals, right?
I know you do.
I love those deals.
Well, and that's why talking about the micro is so important, because the capitalist market pushes more towards those really big spaces and those really big deals. But what we need at the city level is small spaces. Like, goes all the way back to Jane Jacobs, like old spaces and small spaces and funky spaces where it's not prescribed by the math what you can do there. And so we see that too with retail as spaces get more expensive. And as we have all these entrepreneurs in Charlotte, they just need space to try things. And with the micro retail that David Furman and Aaron Ligon and the Rail Yard crew have done at Central Rail Yard, you can see, in a pandemic in 2020, there were 14 new businesses that opened, all mostly between April and July of last year when nothing else was opening. And they're doing great and they're neat. There's a cactus shop and a whole bunch of small boutiques, and Brown Sugar Collab, which is a minority owned small business that features all product lines that are owned by Black women. And you have a roller derby skate shop and a Mexican paletas popsicle shop, and like all these really cool things that are only possible because you have these neat small spaces that are really easy for retailers to come into. And we need a lot more of that. And we need visionaries from the developer side and the broker side, and especially the investor side, to see the promise of like, hey, if I do that, it actually makes all my other assets even more valuable as well, because you have this great street life and all kinds of people will come in to find something that interests them and maybe discover something else at the same time.
Yeah, I truly think that micro retail is it's a part of the future. I don't know how, I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but it's very logical. If you look at co-working space from an office standpoint, it's the same freaking thing. If you look at food halls, it's the same thing. You're giving people a little bit of runway, letting them conserve capital as they get a business up and running, and to use your words, letting them try things, right, without having to mortgage the house and mortgage their future. They can come into a 250 300 square foot space and sign a 6-month deal or a year deal, as opposed to a typical deal that I do, which is 10 years, massive upfront capital. But you have extremely intelligent people trying this. So I did a podcast with Mace Rich, which is one of the largest mall developers and owners in the world. And they did this thing called Brand Box. And they took a really popular space in a mall, or not like their main space in a mall, but they took a space in a mall and set it up to be extremely easy for direct to consumer brands to set up shop, right? And not sign a, some of our leases cost $25,000, $30,000 just to paper up a lease, right? Not to mention, the build out cost and the tenant improvement cost and the landlord improvement cost, yada, yada, yada. So it's very logical to me to come in, you take a space, you split it up small, you keep the infrastructure really simple, and you give people an opportunity to try something. I think that was a really good way to put it. So I
The other
don't
thing that
think.
those small spaces give us, Adam, is it levels the playing field a little bit. We know that we have this really unequal system where you have some people who have plentiful access to capital,
Mhm.
and then a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas who just don't have the same kind of access to broker relationships, banker relationships, family and friends investment to draw on. And the smaller the spaces, the more manageable that upfit is too, the more
100%.
manageable the overall cost. And so I think like baking in those small spaces is going to help us as a city really show each other new ways of doing things and create a lot more opportunity where we're missing out right now on great ideas and brilliant entrepreneurs who just need a chance.
Well, so let's not even look at it from like I want to help people get into business, like somewhat altruistic lens. Let's look at it from a capital, like, just, I don't care about anybody, retail developer, like cold-blooded sense, right? The reason that people like going to a development more than once, right? The first time you want to go and see it, but after a while it gets stale. If you go in and you're doing nothing but 10-year leases, which is what we typically do, after year 2, year 3, there's no discovery there anymore. There's no like, oh my, there's not that turning a corner and looking in that window and saying, oh my God, I didn't know that I needed that in my life, but that looks amazing. I want to go in there and try it. So even more than your point, which is very valid, which is it's leveling the playing field. It's giving these people a chance to get into business. It's good business. It's placemaking. in a way that retail was able to get away from, because we were kind of fat and happy and enjoying this just massive runway of brick and mortar retail that's been going on for a while. And it's changing. And if you're not a curator of your space, and you're not in the business of constantly operating your retail establishment, this goes from a small shop retailer to a developer to a mall owner, you're done. You're going to be out of business. Maybe not today, but shortly.
Well, and there's something else magical in the two or three places where we have examples of this that are really working well in Charlotte too, which is the co-tenancy element.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can get a micro space in a mall or a micro space in a bigger development with a lot of big footprint retail. But if you only have one or two and they're tucked in, you don't have that same, it's co-tenancy. You don't have that same accretive value. And what we have now at the rail yard and at Camp North End and a couple more that are in the works are a whole string of these spaces. So you can, Ladder Arcade, Brevard Court, and Uptown's another good example where you've got a whole string of these small spaces where there are really cool things that can happen. And so I'm glad we have these now. I hope when your clients come to town, you can take them to see those spaces and ask them, how can you put this in your space? And like, is there a part of this ground floor stretch where instead of putting in two tenants at 15,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet each, you could do something really different. And it's going to take someone, I think, seeing it working really well other places, because it's a different way of doing things, and that's hard to do. But I believe, contrary to what you said earlier, that developers and folks in the real estate industry do have warm blood. And
No,
so
I didn't say that they all have cold blood. I just mean that it, even being cold blooded, I think it could still be good business. No, there are real estate people out there that care about everyone, I'm sure, somewhere. So while we're talking about altruism, let's talk about you guys' innovation fund. I am not as familiar with it as I should be. Walk me through why it was a big deal and what you guys are working on.
I would love to. Thanks for asking. So, last year, COVID hit, everybody had to go to stay home. A lot of things shut down. Everything was kind of pushed sideways. And it was hard on everybody, right? Like really, really tough times. And then in particular, like because of the work we do, working with a lot of the retailers and small businesses and stakeholders throughout Center City and especially in South End, we felt it with them right away of like,
Sure.
oh God, this is a small margin business anyway.
Yeah.
Now what? And had the good fortune to start talking with a couple really visionary corporate leaders here who like heard what we were saying and got it and put money out there. So we developed this fund designed to complement but not replace the CARES Act funding that was coming from the federal government through the state and the city to help small businesses. So CARES Act funding was focused on your essentials, rent, payroll, and utilities. And we designed with leadership financing from Honeywell and strong participation from Duke Energy and Bank of America, Foundation from the Carolinas, and a few others. This fund that was a competitive fund for innovative ideas to help entrepreneurs pivot, do new things, develop resilience, basically come out of this time, not just surviving, but stronger with new ideas and new muscles and new way of doing things. So it was a competitive process. We had 3 rounds. The first 2 rounds were funded by the private partners, Honeywell, Bank of America, Duke, Knight Foundation. The third round was through the city, funded by the CARES Act funding. So that was open to anyone in the city. The first 2 rounds were just Center City. And through that, we funded 116 small businesses with grants on the range of $20,000 to $40,000. We had a couple that were really small, where some people came to us and said, you know what, I just need $3,000. I just need $5,000. But for the most part, they were bigger to do cool new things. Outdoor patio spaces, new e-commerce lines, new ways of communicating with customers, new ways of packaging and distributing in a different way to allow for no contact and distribution. Whole new business lines out of an existing space. One of my favorite examples is Bulgogi Box, which is this fantastic Korean barbecue right on Camden and South End. And Jin is putting in a whole new breakfast line of ready to eat Korean breakfasts. Whereas before she was just lunch and dinner, this allows her to have a whole product line and revenue stream that takes advantage of the space she's paying rent on anyway, but also in the morning. And at the same time, it's introducing this cool new thing that we did not have in Charlotte beforehand. So it's been really exciting. It was really hard on our team because we'd never done anything like it before. We didn't hire anyone new. We just did it. And the demand we got was huge. I mean, I think overall we had demand of close to $25 million and we had 2 to give out, maybe 3. But so I think overall, we read every single application, usually twice. So we have a really good sense now of how much entrepreneurial talent there is in our city and how many great ideas are out there, and people just need a chance.
So how can people get involved in that side of things? I'm sure there's people out there that are feeling or that know people that are feeling the pinch that want to get involved. How can people that aren't in Center City Partners get involved and help out?
Yeah, great question. So a couple ways, maybe depending on who you are. If you're a business who wants to participate, we're fundraising now to do another round of innovation fund funding. If you're someone who sees the promise of this and you want to help, call me and my colleagues because we're fundraising for it now. And we've proven now we've done 3 rounds of this. A bunch of the initial projects, they're all designed to be initially something you can do in about 90 days. So a lot of them are nearing completion. We know this works, and call us. We would love to have your help. But the other thing that we're doing from all of this is that we knew there was going to be more demand than we had money for.
Sure.
And so we have a pretty intensive case management process, case study process for each one of the businesses. And we're documenting the lessons that they're learning. And there will be a good kind of reporting out way that all the businesses in our community can learn from the things that these businesses are doing. So lessons about the contracting and the permitting and the hurdles and sourcing for whatever changes you need to make inside or outside your business, or lessons on financing. There's a lot of lessons around process and e-commerce. And those will all be things that we'll share. That'll all be shared through the South End website and the Center City Partners website, through our social channels. We've done a couple of webinars about those too, and I imagine we'll be doing more of those on the lessons side as that comes along.
All right, Megan, you've already been extremely, extremely generous with your time. While we're talking about contacting, tell people how they can get more information about what you guys do, how they can interact with you guys, or you specifically, whether it be website, social. Let people know how they can get in touch.
Yeah, well, you can find me and all of our cool South End stuff at southendclt.com. That's our website. It's all there. It's really cool. Calendars, directories, my contact information. We've got a really great communications team that puts out newsletters, and you can follow us at southendclt.com. And then for Charlotte Center, at South End CLT on social. And then for Center City Partners, charlottecentercity.org and uptowncharlotte.com will get you information to the other aspects of what we do as well.
Awesome. All right. So I always like to end an interview with kind of quick knee-jerk reaction, kind of rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Shoot.
You sure? All right. We know breweries have played a big role in South End's evolution. What's your favorite brewery in South End?
Oh, I'm not going to answer that.
I knew it. I knew you were gonna about. All right, you can give me a podium. You can do top 3. I'll let you off the hook a little bit.
Love Triple C. They have their innovation.
I haven't been to the new food truck. I hear it's incredible.
It's incredible.
That's what I heard. What's the name? What's the name of the food truck? Izzy's. I was with James Yoder yesterday, who is a total coffee stud in town, and he was telling me that it is unbelievably good.
It is awesome. It's named after, I think, the niece or the nephew of the pizza chef. He came over from another well-established pizza joint in town, off the chain, really, really good. Wooden Robot. Gotta love their beers. And their new outdoor patio that they've put in post-COVID, also Innovation Fund. Really, really awesome. They're great. But don't ask me to, pick my favorite children. It's me.
All right, fair enough. And huge news: Resident Culture announced yesterday they're opening a new brewery over there, Gold District area, I believe. So another massive brewery opening in South End. Some people say we're at Max Brewery. I say you're crazy. breweries are the new kind of local watering holes, and I think we're going to see plenty. So in 2012, just like 5,000 people lived in South End. What's the count today?
Upwards of
Roughly.
nine, 10, 9 to 10,000, and there's
So
a lot of new residential still coming.
so double the population in less than 10 years. It's
Hmm.
amazing. So Grant Thornton, most recent company announcing plans to move their office. Do you see this? How do you see South End? What does South End look like to you from an office perspective in another 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, there's more than 1 million square feet of office under construction right now. There's a lot of interest in that. I mean, obviously, COVID is changing some things about how we imagine office and how it goes going forward. But I think big picture, we see people are looking for a place to work that has a sense of place where you can leave work and go someplace really cool to get a drink after work, something neat for lunch. People who work in South End on a gorgeous day like today will go take a walk on the rail trail for 30 minutes at lunchtime, get some air, see the city. I think we'll continue to see a lot of interest in South End and markets like it because of those quality of life elements. We know that that's what talent is looking for. And we see the employers really following talent. So I think we'll continue to see more. It'll be fun.
So, what was your favorite project to work on through the Innovation Fund, or what was the most innovative thing that you worked on coming out of it?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know that I have one for you. Not just one.
You're bowing out of the two favorite. You can't pick a favorite.
Well, let's see. We already talked about pizza. We already talked about bulgogi box. Girl Tribe's upstairs loft. Girl Tribe is a small women-owned boutique that features
Love
all women
them.
product lines.
Very
They
cool.
usually do big pop-ups and big pop-up
Huge.
markets a couple of times a year. It's a huge line of business for them, and they showcase and support all these local brands. COVID happened, that couldn't happen. And so they were given an opportunity from Asana, their landlord, to take over an upstairs loft space. And they turned it into this really cool secondary retail space that features all of those lines. It's got a rotating cast of product lines from all the different businesses who are part of their pop-ups. And it's created this like really cool additional retail experience, still totally in line with their brand. And I love the way that they're sharing that opportunity with these other businesses and creating a cool experience at the same time. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
they're great little entrepreneurs, man. I actually did a podcast with them a while back, and it's fun. They like talk in their own code when you're in the room with them because like they communicate with each other through like ESP or something. It's really funny to watch. It's a little hard to get used to for a minute because you can tell they're communicating in a way that's like nonverbal. It's hilarious. All right, last question. You ready? You have a
Shoot.
magic wand. South End is missing one thing or needs one thing. What would you change? Or what do you think South End needs?
Someone asked me this question a couple of weeks ago, and I
I'm not
said,
very original, Megan. I'm sorry. I'll try.
Bamiyan.
What is it?
Bamiyan, my favorite Afghani restaurant from DC. Charlotte does not have any Afghani food. If I had a magic wand, that's what I'd bring.
All right.
Delicious.
Hopefully everybody's listening. The South End Czar wants Afghan food now. We need to make this happen. Megan, I just want to take a second and acknowledge you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your perspective on South End, which is one of the most important neighborhoods, certainly in this city, if not the state. So just want to take a second, acknowledge you. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your insights with us.
That's great. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Adam.